If you're trying to start a website right now, you've probably seen two options pop up everywhere: shared hosting and VPS hosting. And if you're like most people, the first reaction is usually, wait, what is the actual difference? Because they both let you host a website, but they're built very differently. One is designed for simplicity and lower cost, and the other gives you a lot more power and control. So the real question is, which one should you actually pick? In this video, I'm going to walk through what VPS hosting looks like, what shared hosting actually is, and how to tell which one makes the most sense for your website before you launch it. I'm Erin from My First Website. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, if you want to follow along with what I'm looking at, you can open the link in the description below. That'll take you directly to the Hostinger page, so you can scroll through this with me and see exactly what I'm seeing. Now, if we scroll down to the pricing section, you'll see that Hostinger currently offers a few different VPS plans depending on how much power your project needs. Right now, there are 4 main plans, and the biggest difference between them is simply how much performance you get as your website or project grows. So the first plan starts at $6.49 per month, which is the entry-level option. So this is typically where people start if they're running a smaller project, experimenting with VPS hosting for the first time, or building something that doesn't require a ton of server power yet. The next plan is $8.99 per month, and this one is often where many people land because it gives you noticeably more resources than the first plan while still staying very affordable. If you're planning to run something a little heavier than a basic site, this tier usually provides a comfortable middle ground. After that, there is a $12.99 per month plan, which starts moving into the more powerful territory. This is the kind of plan that makes sense if you expect more traffic, or if you're running multiple services, or you just want extra performance headroom so your server doesn't struggle as your project grows. And finally, the largest plan shown here is $25.99 per month, which is designed for much more demanding workloads. So this type of setup is typically used for larger websites, applications, or projects that need a lot more server capacity. Now, something worth noting is that regardless of which plan you choose, they all include several core features like fast NVMe storage, powerful AMD processors, built-in security protections, weekly backups, and high network speeds. So the main decision here isn't really about features, it's about how much performance you think you'll need as your website or application grows. But pricing alone doesn't really explain why someone would choose VPS hosting in the first place. To understand that, we need to look at what these servers are actually built to do. Here you can see several features highlighted that explain what VPS hosting is designed to provide. First, you'll notice AMD EPYC processors mentioned again. These are powerful server-grade CPUs designed for high performance and reliability. They're built specifically for environments where many applications and websites need to run smoothly at the same time. You'll also see NVMe SSD storage, which we mentioned earlier. Because NVMe drives can read and write data much faster than traditional storage, websites hosted on NVMe servers often load significantly faster. Speed matters because faster websites tend to provide better user experiences and improved search rankings. Another feature highlighted here is 1 GB per second network speed. This refers to how quickly data can move between the server and the internet. Higher network speeds help ensure websites remain responsive even when traffic increases. You'll also see Hostinger API access, which allows developers to automate server tasks and integrate hosting infrastructure with other tools. These kinds of features are particularly useful for developers, startups, and businesses that need more control over how their server environment operates. But servers also need to support different types of applications and workloads. So next, let's look at how hosting platforms support deployment. Modern hosting environments are built to support a wide range of tools and applications, especially for developers or businesses running more complex projects. For example, many developers use tools like Docker, which allows applications to run inside containers. Containers make it easier to package software, so it runs consistently across different environments without constantly needing to reconfigure things. You may also see platforms like N8N, which helps automate workflows between different tools and services. This can be useful for connecting apps together or creating automated processes that run in the background. Hosting platforms often allow users to quickly deploy these types of tools directly from their dashboard. Instead of setting up everything manually, developers can launch applications, APIs, or back-end services much faster. So someone building a website might also run things like automation tools, back-end APIs, machine learning applications, applications or database systems alongside their main site. VPS hosting makes this possible because users have much more flexibility and control over their server environment. But of course, having a powerful server is only helpful if it's also easy to manage. So next, let's look at how a VPS platform simplifies server management. Server management used to require a lot of technical expertise, but modern hosting platforms include tools that make server management much easier. Here you can see several examples. First is managed firewall protection, which helps protect servers from unauthorized access and malicious traffic. Security is a major concern for any server connected to the internet. Next, you'll see DDoS protection, which helps prevent attacks that attempt to overwhelm servers with large amounts of traffic. These protections help ensure websites remain accessible even during unusual traffic spikes. Another feature is the browser terminal, which allows users to access their server directly from their web browser. This means developers can run commands and configure their server without needing additional tools. You'll also see Docker Compose management, which helps users organize and run multiple applications together. And finally, there is full root access, which gives users complete control over their server environment. This level of control is one of the major reasons developers choose VPS hosting. However, not every website requires this level of customization. Many smaller websites run perfectly well in simpler hosting environments. So now let's take a look at shared hosting. What is shared hosting? Shared hosting is one of the most common entry-level hosting options. In a shared hosting website, multiple websites are hosted on the same physical server. Each website has its own files, content, and databases, but they all share the server's computing resources. Because the server is shared among multiple users, hosting providers can offer much lower prices. That's why shared hosting is often the most affordable option for beginners launching their first website. Hosting providers also handle most of the server maintenance behind the scenes. This includes things like software updates, security patches, and infrastructure management. For many beginners, this makes shared hosting easier to manage compared to VPS hosting. But because resources are shared, performance can vary depending on how heavily the server is being used. To understand this better, it helps to look at how shared hosting works behind the scenes. So this diagram shows how shared hosting environments operate. In this model, a single server hosts multiple websites at the same time. Each website stores its files and data on the server, but they all rely on the same CPU memory and network resources. When a visitor enters a website's domain name, the browser sends a request to the server. The server processes that request and sends the website's content back to the visitor. Because the server is handling requests for multiple websites, it distributes resources between them. For smaller websites with moderate traffic, the setup usually works perfectly well, but if a website begins receiving significantly more visitors or requires more computing power, the shared environment can eventually become limiting. That's often when website owners begin exploring VPS hosting. When VPS hosting actually makes sense. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, when should I actually choose VPS hosting? VPS hosting usually starts to make sense when your website or project needs more control and more consistent performance. For example, if you're running a website that's starting to get steady traffic, VPS hosting can give you more stability because your server resources aren't being shared the same way they are in a shared environment. Another common situation is when developers need to run custom software or multiple services on the same server. With shared hosting, you're usually limited to the tools and configurations provided by the hosting company. But with VPS hosting, you can install different applications, configure your server environment, and manage things at a much deeper level. This is especially helpful if you're building something more complex than a basic website. For example, you might be running a website along a backend API, automation tools, or database services. VPS hosting gives you the flexibility to run all of those together. Another reason people choose VPS hosting is performance consistency. In shared hosting environments, resources are distributed across many websites. That usually works fine for smaller sites, but if one website on the server suddenly gets a lot of traffic, it can affect performance for others. With VPS hosting, your virtual server is isolated from other users, which helps ensure your website has access to the resources it needs. When shared hosting is actually the better choice. Shared hosting sometimes gets overlooked because people assume more powerful automatically means better, but that's not always true. For many websites, shared hosting is actually the simpler and more practical choice. If you're launching your first website, blog, or portfolio, shared hosting is often more than enough to get started. Another situation where shared hosting works well is when your website traffic is still fairly small. For example, if you're launching a personal site, a small business page, or a content blog that's still growing, hosting, the shared environment usually provides more than enough performance. Shared hosting also tends to include simplified dashboards and tools that make things easier for beginners. Many hosting platforms offer one-click installations for things like WordPress, website builders, and other common tools. This reduces the technical barrier for people who just want to launch a website without learning server management. And one of the biggest advantages is simply cost. Because shared hosting distributes server costs across many users, it's often the most affordable way to get a website online. That's why a lot of people actually start with shared hosting and then upgrade later if their website grows or requires more performance. So instead of thinking about VPS hosting as automatically better, it's usually more helpful to think about it as the next step once your project needs more power or flexibility. The simple way to decide. So if you're trying to make the decision right now, here's a simple way to think about it. If you're launching your first website, blog, or small project, shared hosting is usually the easiest and most affordable starting point. But if you already know you need more control, more performance, or the ability to run multiple services, then VPS hosting is often the better choice. So when it comes to choosing between shared hosting and VPS hosting, the right option really depends on what you're building. Shared hosting is typically the simplest and most affordable option for beginners launching smaller websites or personal projects. VPS hosting offers more power, more control, and more flexibility for websites that require higher performance or customer server environments. Understanding how these hosting environments work can help you make a better decision before launching your website. If you want to explore hosting options yourself, you can check out the Hostinger link in the description below. Right now they are having the sale, so make sure to grab our link below and get the sale while it's on a good deal. And if you're learning how to build your first website, make sure you're subscribed for more tutorials and walkthroughs here on the channel. I'm Erin from My First Website. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.